In March of 2021, a photograph of Gordon Elliott that showed him sitting on a dead horse caused a public furore. He was suspended from training for 6 months and fined €15,000 by the Irish horse racing regulatory body. And within days of the photograph surfacing, the BHA had followed suit. Sponsors cut their ties with Elliott, and many of his best horses were removed and sent to rival trainers ahead of the Cheltenham Festival. Elliott is now on the brink of making his return, and he spoke to Gary O'Brien about his regrets for what he calls a terrible mistake.
Gordon, the 6-month suspension of your training licence is almost at an end. Looking back on it now, how do you reflect on the events of last March?
I suppose it's something, Gary, that I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life that I'm very embarrassed about. I can't apologise enough. Something in my position that shouldn't have happened. It's something I want to put behind me and just move forward.
There was obviously a huge public furore when the photograph emerged of you sitting on the dead horse Morgan. Can you fully appreciate why there was such a reaction to the image?
Yeah, I can, to be honest. As soon as I seen the photograph, I knew it wasn't good. I got an awful shock when I seen it on the Saturday evening myself. And you know, it's something I never want to experience again, but as I said already, it's something I lie in bed every night thinking about, and it's something I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life, and I'm in my position, it shouldn't have happened, and it was a terrible mistake.
Once the photo was out there, do you feel you handled the situation as well as you could have, or are there maybe things that you might have done differently in hindsight?
I suppose in hindsight, Gary, you know, maybe you'll always do things differently, but you know, I never forget seeing the photograph. I was at Fairyhouse, the horse was just about to go out for the last race for the bumper, and I seen it. I got an awful shock. I contacted our governing bodies, IHRB, and I contacted Horse Racing Ireland, told them about the photograph, said it was me. They dealt with it straight away. I had a meeting with them the following day. I was very straight up about it the whole way, but you know, it was something I would never like to have to do again, to be honest.
Your explanation at the time described a situation that came about almost entirely due to circumstance, but can you see why people might maybe have difficulty believing that the photo wasn't staged?
Yeah, listen, I can understand what everyone thinks or what everyone doesn't think. You know, I had obviously never seen the photograph before until the Saturday evening, and you know, it's something that I want to forget about and put behind me. It's something I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. Every night I lie in bed, I think about it. I said before, all I can do is apologise. You've
got a reputation for being quite a thick-skinned individual, but this was clearly on another level to anything you've had to face before. How were you able to deal with being on the receiving end of such a torrent of criticism from both within and outside of racing? Yeah, listen, you think you're thick-skinned until you see something like this. To be honest, it was terrible. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. You know, we got a week of, you know, obviously very bad social media, newspapers, television, on Twitter and everything else like it. But it was, you know, for me it was something I've never experienced, wouldn't ever like to experience again. But for my family, it was unbelievable. For all the staff in the yard, you know, for something very foolish I did, all the pain I put them through. But it was something I never like to go through again. And you know, for as I said, for my family, friends, all my staff, and you know, even all the people in my village in Summerhill, you know, it was terrible. I probably didn't show my face in Summerhill for 3 or 4 months after, but it wasn't nice. Just to broaden out what you're saying there, I mean, you've built up a very large operation here, and clearly this impacted on an awful lot of other people. Did that make it easier in terms of going through it, or maybe more difficult that so many other people had been impacted by what you had done a couple of years back? Listen, it was something very stupid I did. I apologise to everyone for what I did, but it was my fault, and the blame stops at me. And you know, as I said already, I apologise to everyone, and all I want to do is put it behind me. What's your feeling about how you were treated by the respective authorities here and in Britain, the IHRB and the BHA, in terms of the sanctions they imposed?
Listen, I thought obviously I'm governed by the IHRB, that's who I'm licensed with, so that's obviously who I can speak about. I thought they dealt with it very fairly. I made a mistake, I deserved to be punished. I got a year's suspension with 6 months of it disqualified. I thought I got a very fair hearing on the day. It was dealt with very quick, and I thought in the proper manner. And as I've said already, I'm days away from coming back racing now, and I just can't wait. You know, it's something I never want to happen again, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
What about the BHA though? They acted swiftly by saying that they wouldn't be accepting entries for the Cheltenham Festival, which was coming up on the horizon. What are your thoughts about how they went about things?
Look, to the best of my knowledge, I'm licensed by the IHRB, and that's who was dealing with me. So I can't really comment on that because I'm not really sure the rights or the wrongs on what they decided to do. But their decision was their decision, and I just want to move on.
The IHRB Referrals Committee stated in their written verdict that they felt this was part of a concerted attack on you. I think they were presumably referring to other content that was circulating on social media at the time. Have you any thoughts on what the motivation might have been for whoever it was to release the photo into the public domain so long after it was taken?
To be honest, I obviously think it was someone, there was malice in it. There was someone that obviously had it in for me. For this to come out 9 days before the Cheltenham Festival, it seemed like it was time perfect. I went from having probably as good of a yard of horses going to Cheltenham as anyone could have or wish to having it all took from under my feet just over a week from the festival. There was obviously a few other incidents after happening in and around the yard at the time, the weeks previous. There was a Garda investigation into it, and it's still being dealt with, and I can't really say much more about it at the moment, to be honest.
Is that something you, though, are keen to know yourself? Would it help you at all to know, to find out who was behind this?
To be honest, I just want to put it behind me. At this stage, all I want to do is get back doing what I love most, which is training horses, and put it all behind me.
And obviously, you kind of referred to it there as well, Gordon. A number of high-profile horses were removed from the yard in the aftermath. Marquee names like MVLN, Sir Gerhard and Quilixios. And I think you were quoted at the time as saying that their departure meant you had effectively hit rock bottom. Did watching them leave the yard really hammer home the tasks that you would have in your hand to resurrect your career?
I suppose watching them leaving the yard was probably, was very, very tough. It wasn't just tough for me, Gary. It was tough for the staff in the yard. These lads and lassies in the yard that look after these horses. They put their whole life into them. They adore these horses. And for a mistake I made, they lost them, not just me. They lost them as well. But I tell you a lie, if I tell you, I don't lie in bed every night thinking about MVLN and Quintilox, Sir Gerard and all the rest of them, the few young horses we had. When I had MVLN for the 3 or 4 years, there wasn't a night I didn't go to bed thinking about him. So, I've suffered for doing that, and I'm going to suffer for the next 3 or 4 years for something very silly.
Denise Foster, as we know, was brought in to take over the licence here at Cullentra House while you were serving your suspension. But understandably, I think there was a lot of speculation that you might still, in effect, be pulling the strings, if you like. What exactly has been the nature of that arrangement?
In fairness to Denise Sneezy Foster, she's been brilliant. She didn't have to be asked twice to step in and take the licence over. She holds the licence. She's been the boss. I suppose this was a bit of time for me to maybe to think about a lot of things. I spent a lot of time away from the yard, thinking about things, and obviously thinking about my future. But Denise has been brilliant. She's probably been another pair of eyes around the yard for the last 6 months. A different head and a different, probably an opinion. For not just for me, maybe to have a chat with when I was low over the last 6 months, but for all the different members of staff. for the girls in the office, you know, we've a lot of young people in the yard, which all the racing yards do, and for them it was tough. But Denise, you know, she was probably like a bit of a mother figure for the last 6 months to everyone, just to keep everyone, you know, advise them on whatever they needed or whatever questions they had to be asked.
You obviously live on site here at Cullentra. Did that make it difficult to kind of remove yourself from the situation? Have you always kind of been involved to some extent, or keeping an eye on things at the very least?
Yeah, I think anyone that's been in the yard knows I live right in the middle of the yard, so obviously, you know, if I step out my back door, I'm in the yard. Obviously, I spent a lot of time around the yard and a lot of time thinking about things, but Denise was the boss. But it was tough. It was a tough 6 months, and you know, I'm glad we're almost at the end of it.
What was it like watching the Cheltenham Festival, seeing the horses whose preparation you'd overseen so meticulously compete under someone else's name, particularly obviously when the situation was still so raw?
It was unbelievable. We're talking maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 days later, after the horses leaving the yard and winning in Cheltenham. It was nothing I didn't expect, Gary. We these horses trained to the minute. Cheltenham was the plan. I pointed out the races these horses were going to from early in the season. You know, I was obviously good and heartbroken to see them winning. Not in my name, but I was happy to see them winning because it had been the plan. But it was tough to take. But listen, if I'd been training, we would have had 6 or 7 winners and had a great season. So that was probably the one bit I could take out of it, to know I had prepared these horses to the minute for the Olympics of our sport. But I must say, obviously the horses that left the yard, you know, when Quicksloss won the Triumph Hurdle, Henry rang me that evening, you know, and we had to chat about it, and you know, it was brilliant. And Sir Gerard hadn't passed the line, but Willie Mullins had texted me. I'd say the horse hadn't even pulled up, and I got a message off Willie. So as upset as I was, that meant an awful lot. You know, Ian Ferguson the same. He rang me. That meant that just showed me, you know, how tight we are in this game. You know, there's one thing, you know, we're all very competitive and we all want to beat each other, but there's one thing about Irish, when we're down, we all stick together. And I won't forget them few phone calls as long as I live, to be honest.
Did it ever cross your mind to kind of shut yourself away for those few days, or had you people around you? Were you happy enough to watch the racing, even though you probably had a fair idea of what was going to happen?
I knew it was going to happen, of course I did. Yeah, it did actually, to be honest. There was a stage I didn't even want to watch the racing, but a lot of my very close friends, colleagues, and, you know, my family, you know, they all came and watched the racing with me. You know, the jockeys that ride for me that couldn't be in Cheltenham that year, every day I watched it somewhere different, and with my friends, colleagues and family, you know, it was nice to be with them, but it wasn't the way I wanted it.
Has the whole episode, do you think, served as something of a wake-up call for you on a personal level? I mean, have you had to make changes to your lifestyle as a result of all this?
I suppose a wake-up call, yeah, it's definitely been a wake-up call for me. You know, I'm training now probably since 2007, 2008, sort of busy. And, you know, you kind of get into a bit of a rat race, and you get on that wheel and you don't know when to come off it. It's all I cared about was training winners, where the next race meeting was, where the next horse I could source. Probably became a little bit selfish and only cared about myself. It's probably given me a bit of time to, you know, have, I suppose, think more about my friends, my family, and I suppose most of all my staff, who, you know, they've been brilliant through all this, and, you know, only for them, we wouldn't be here having this conversation.
And Gordon, in July, Panorama produced a documentary which aired on BBC One entitled The Dark Side of Horse Racing, in which you featured quite heavily. What's your feeling about how you and the sport as a whole were portrayed in that?
To be honest, it's something I can't really say too much about, because we're in the middle of getting legal advice about making a complaint to the proper authorities. But yeah, it wasn't nice to see what happened. I've never seen anything like it before in my life, and I wouldn't like to see it again. What happened in that abattoir in the UK. Yeah, I wouldn't like to see it again. It wasn't nice.
And I know you're adamant that the horses you formerly trained that featured in the programme, though no longer suitable for racing, left your care in generally good condition and changed hands in good faith. But clearly, the way you're talking there, it was still a shock, very much a shock to find out the fate that befell them, was it?
Yeah, definitely. All horses had left my yard. I didn't know any of the horses were going to end up in an abattoir in the UK, nor did I give permission to them to be there. They'd all left my yard. One horse to be a riding horse, and the other two, obviously not. But it wasn't nice to see. But it's a worry for me. I suppose going forward that this doesn't happen again. We've rehomed, I think, almost 50 horses in maybe the last 3.5 years. And as much as we try and keep track of where they all are, what's going to happen with them in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years time, as much as I want to sit here and guarantee it, it's very hard for anyone to be able to say they can guarantee it. Since this programme's happened, any horses we've rehomed, or all the ones we can be in contact with, we've asked for quarterly reports on the horses and photographs. But for me, going forward, I think it's something our governing bodies are going to have to give us a bit more advice on and give us more of a roadmap. Like for me, if I sell my car today, when it leaves my yard, it's signed on the book who has taken responsibility for it. And as much as I try to keep track of it, Gary, who's to say a horse can't change hands in 4 or 5 or 6 years' time down the road, and something like this can happen again? For me, I'd never like to see it happening again.
No, and I think it's a responsibility on everyone in the industry, isn't it? This, again, to use that phrase, it can act as something maybe of a wake-up call in terms of we do need to know what's going to happen to these horses when the racing days are over.
Most definitely.
Gordon, I have to ask this question, notwithstanding your comments about the Panorama programme, do you believe that the programme would have been made were it not for the photograph of you sitting on the ill-fated Morgan?
I think the programme would have been made. I think obviously when the picture of me was there, it was very easy for them to use me as a
somebody to hang it on?
Yes, exactly. It's something, that they were probably always trying to make, and it just made it easier for them to make it. But it's something we're all going to have to be very careful about and make sure everything is done properly from now on.
When you do make your return to the racecourse, initially here in Ireland and eventually further on in Britain, are you expecting people to look at you or treat you any differently than before?
It's probably something, Gary, I've thought about every night. Since it's happened. Obviously, anyone that knows me knows I love going racing. I love going to the sales, training horses and buying horses and getting into win races is what I love doing most. But I mean, it's all I can ask for. Is that people will give me a chance. I apologise for what I did. For someone in my position, it should have never happened. All I want is to move forward and get back training race horses. Look, I understand at the time everyone, had their opinion of what they thought or didn't think. There was, I suppose, a lot of people in and out of our industry looking for 5 minutes of fame or looking for a headline. But listen, I just want to put it all behind me, and I want to get back to doing what I do best and what I love, which is training horses.
And how do you see the future now?
Listen, obviously, things are we're starting from the bottom again. Well, maybe not from the bottom, but it's going to be tough. But I can't wait to get back training and you know, get back out to all my staff and all my owners and get back doing what I love.
And have the events of the last 6 months made you more appreciative of everything you have here and, if anything, more determined to achieve this success?
I suppose appreciate, you know, I always appreciate what I've had, you know. I'm very, very lucky to be in the position I am, to have the yard I have, to have the owners I have, and to have all the staff I have. And I just want to get back and get back doing what I love.
Is it almost a case of maybe having to feel like you have to prove yourself again?
I don't think determination was ever something I lacked, you know. I love training horses, and training winners is what I want to do. But I suppose I'm determined now to prove myself to people, to my staff, to my owners, to everyone in the industry. That's what I want to do, is prove myself that I'm not the monster that some people are making me out to be.
Gordon, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Gary.